Let's get it in. You do this back, made back, proof is back. Tell the whole world the truth is back.
Hi, I'm Billy Mays.
Where my hustlers, where my boosters at? I don't care what you do for stack. I know the world glued you back to the wall. You gotta run through that. I've been through that, been shot at, shoot that. Gotta keep the peace like a Buddhist. I ain't a new jack, nobody gon' Wesley snipe me. It's less than likely that I bring Jedi Knight. The more space I get, the better I write.
Well, welcome to Live from Salina, and go ahead and give us a brief introduction on yourself, my friend.
All right, thank you very much. I'm Dr. Arden Anderson. I am a primary care physician and also occupational medicine physician in Leavenworth, Kansas. Was just recently Lansing, but we moved 2 weeks ago, and I live in Olathe, actually. I'm also a colonel in the Air Force Reserves. I am a flight surgeon, and I have been activated 4 times and deployed 3. So I do know what it's like to be away during wartime. I actually grew up on a dairy farm in Michigan, small dairy farm on a gravel road, and so I know what it's like to milk cows every day, twice a day, 7 days a week in Michigan winters.
And you love it.
And I can still do that, actually. I was an exchange student also through the FFA work exchange program in the Netherlands on a dairy farm and sugar beet and potato farm. So I am familiar as well with agriculture in different parts of the world. My undergraduate degree then was in ag education from the University of Arizona, a dry state. Not talking about alcohol, of course, but a irrigation and water issue, dry state. So I know a little bit about dry land agriculture, and also then became a vocational agriculture teacher. So I taught high school voag and biology and actually coached track. So I know what it's like to put lesson plans together. I know what it's like to be a teacher and having to deal with children. And then finally, when I was age 34, I decided, okay, I'm gonna go to medical school.
Wow.
And so I was later in life. I had also already been through a few school of hard knocks type of thing. But I wanted to do more, and I really recognized at the time there is a connection between agriculture and medicine. And so becoming a physician, I had a couple friends of mine, one professor who said, look, you need to go to medical school. So I did. And I've actually continued my agricultural work, and for about 10 years, 98 to 2008, I traveled 100,000 miles a year doing a full-time practice and teaching agriculture to adults, sustainable agriculture around the world. And part of that was in Australia and New Zealand. And one of the very interesting things was that I was in New Zealand about 2006-07, and the organization down there decided, there was a farm management organization, said, we're going to take this guy to task, and we're going to see if what he talks about really works. And long and the short of it, what they found after 10 years of data, the higher the Brix reading, and this is called a refractometer, you take plant sap and put that on there. Most people who raise grapes are familiar with that, but we can use that in wheat and corn and soybeans, all those things, same thing. The higher the Brix reading, which means the higher the nutrient density, the higher the profit. Number 2, and they just came out with this report this year, what they found, have it down here. What they found out was that they can sequester 5% carbon per year, which is about equivalent to 1.2 tons of carbon per acre at a profit. What that means, if we just took a third of Kansas farmers and taught them how to sequester carbon in the soil, 1, their profits are going to be higher. 2, that would equalize all of the carbon emissions that we have in the state of Kansas without changing a thing, without going to electric cars, without changing our electrical production system. As is now, we would sequester that much carbon from the air. So that's the kind of technology that I understand in agriculture and I teach, as well as combine that with medicine.
Well, Gary, give us a brief introduction. You have been on Sample Text in the past. You've been on Live from Salina. I get a lot of comments from people every time you're on, and they're all positive.
Well, as it should be.
You're talking to the wrong people.
Yes.
Well, it's good to be here. Interestingly enough, I was born and raised in Michigan. We've already talked about that. And not far from each other, really, on a small family farm. Went off to college then in Indiana and studied some more and wound up faculty at Iowa State University. Then joined my father-in-law in the John Deere family farm equipment business, our own dealership, and did quite well with that and sold that and moved here and bought a couple of insurance agencies and a horse ranch. So, and I really appreciate what you've offered so far because I'm glad you're in the mix.
Now, does your blood run green?
Well, I tell you what, when I sell it, it's got to be red.
Okay.
Instead of donating this Democrat blood, they pay me for this blood.
No, but John Deere, you know, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
farmers
Yeah.
are John Deere,
Yeah,
their blood's green.
But except when I'm donating blood, it's pretty green. Still, yeah. Good question.
Well, sitting next to me is my good friend Todd Pittenger. Todd, you look very dapper this evening.
Thank you. I'm the news director of a group of radio stations here in Salina. Our company, Rockingham Media, actually now has 31 stations around Kansas, the bulk of them in western Kansas. So if you're looking to get a message out in western Kansas,
There
I
you
can
go,
talk to
right.
you afterwards.
All right, Todd.
But I'm
Look forward
happy
that.
to be on here. Thank you for asking me. We've talked to a lot of the gubernatorial candidates
Yes.
on here, and I have some intriguing questions for you tonight.
And of course, without further ado, before we get to Ross on Skype, we have.
Of course, it's real. How y'all doing this evening? Just here, trying to ask important questions that need to be asked. I do a lot for y'all who don't know. I do music. I do a little philanthropy with what I can do, and I also am a new business owner too, Insatiable Food Truck in Wichita, Kansas. So check that out, insatiable.com.
Look at that.
Yeah, pretty cool.
And of course,
speaking of health, yeah.
This
so-
evening, we are joined, since we're live, we're joined by Ross Long on Skype. Ross, you and I have it's amazing that we're still allowed to do this live on this network. But go ahead and give us a brief introduction, my friend.
Okay, well, I'm basically Jiggy's former partner on radio, and we join up every once in a while. I don't think we could live our lives without doing that now. So beyond that, I moved out here to Colorado, having a pretty good time, and I do some photography, still keep up with the video work every once in a while. And yes, I'm interested I still have a great love for Kansas, and I want the best for it. And since you introduced me last, I will take the first question with Mr. Anderson. So, Mr. Anderson, yes, it is a pleasure to meet you.
Yes,
all the
thank you
rest
very
of
much.
I know you all, so yeah, we're good. So, where are you at for farm policy? I mean, it sounds like you have extensive experience with that. Anything drastic or different that you would add to Kansas farm policy as it is now?
Well, actually, I do. And the thing about it is, of course, as governor, we don't really make federal policy, and the federal policy really is where the Farm Bill comes from as far as its financing and so on. But the thing about it is that Kansas is a dry state on the western side, which is most of our areas of wheat and corn and beans. Yes, we do have the Ogallala aquifer that we can tap, but long term, we can't really depend upon a lot of that, and much of the state really is dry land. And the thing about it is that carbon in the soil really determines how much water holding capacity you're going to have. And one of the things that I have taught for 30 years, and it's interesting you bring that up, because there's an organization out of New Zealand that about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I taught a class down there, and it was a farm management organization, and they said, well, we're going to take this to task. We're either going to prove it or disprove it. And the whole point was that they were looking at One, profitability on the farm, because profitability on the farm is a problem not just in Kansas, in every farm around the world. But the other issue that they were really concerned about is this whole carbon sequestration issue, because at least down there, they're going to be taxed on how much emissions is going on. And so they just came out with a report. Actually, the gentleman who put it out, his name is Peter Floyd. Ecogen is the name of the company. And what they found out was, in the process, farmers can produce highly nutritious food while reducing environmental degradation at a significant profit by following appropriate, sustainable farming processes. And what they proved was, very nicely, they can sequester 5% carbon per year in their soils. And what that meant for New Zealand was that if just 25% of the farms adapted that program, they would be carbon neutral. I ran the numbers for Kansas. If a third of the farmers in Kansas did that, we would be carbon neutral in Kansas without changing anything about what we do with electricity, with power generation, with gasoline, whatever. We would be carbon neutral with just a third of the farmers in Kansas. Most importantly, what they also proved was that the higher the Brix reading, this is a refractometer, this is what a Brix meter is. Actually, most people who raise grapes are familiar with this. You take some plant sap, you put on there, look through, and it gives us a level of sugar in there. Why is that important? Because the higher the Brix reading, the higher the profit per acre, the more carbon we sequester in the soil. The more profit per acre, that's the best farm program you're ever going to have, because that makes farmers independent if they can be profitable. And so the farm program that I see for Kansas, and as governor, what I see as, governors are supposed to be advocates for the state. They're supposed to be out there doing things to help the state improve every part of the state, every economy of the state. And agriculture is our #1 economy in the state. So we need to make farmers more independent. We need to address the water issue by increasing water holding capacity in the soil, and we need to increase farm profitability. At the same time, we address the urban population's interest in carbon sequestration by doing it properly.
Wow.
Good scenario.
That is way above my pay grade. Todd.
That makes sense.
First of all, Doctor, thank you for your service, and thank you for your continuing service, I might
Thank
say
you. Appreciate
also.
it.
I want to talk a little bit about education. It's something that's near and dear to my
Yes.
heart. You mentioned education. I'll tell you, my wife is a teacher. She's been a teacher here in Kansas for 20 years. I have a son who's going to student teach beginning in January at Liberty North High School in the Kansas City area. And that's important because it's on the Missouri side. He specifically did not want to teach in Kansas because of the state of education in Kansas. Specifically, he wanted to teach in Missouri. We're going to have a major teacher shortage. I've seen some statistics within the next 3 to 5 years, a major teacher shortage in Kansas, and that's based on the number or lack thereof of students that are studying to be teachers in Kansas colleges right now.
Absolutely.
What can we do to keep good teachers in Kansas?
Very good question. And I think that's something that everybody really is concerned about if they actually look at what's going on in our state. In my opinion, the best jobs bill you can put forward is an education bill. And what we see over time is that even though the governor can say, oh, if you look at our budget, we're still spending more money in education, the problem is that out of that dollar, less and less is going to the classroom and the teacher.
Right.
And so we need to understand really, where does education actually happen? It happens with the teacher and the student in the classroom. And so we need to work out a formula, an education formula. Of course, the Supreme Court of the state has already said, hey, you're underfunding, so get with it. Unfortunately, what we hear is that, oh no, we need to change the Constitution. No, that doesn't do anything for us long term. We have to find a formula that works for a school over here that may have more special needs, or for a school over here that needs more vocational education. or for a school over here that has some other specific need, and not just say everybody's going to get the same per pupil. We have to put money into it for the future. Because the bottom line is, pay me now, pay me later. If we don't put education first, we're going to pay later, and I see it in the office. We're going to pay for more health care, we're going to pay for more prisons, and we're going to pay for less productivity, and people are going to continue to flee from the state, because the one thing that businesses need are educated workforces. And so if we want to attract business to Kansas, we have to make sure that we first fund education. And first, we need, in that funding, we need to make sure it's going to the teacher and to the classroom. It's not adequate now, which means we need to bring teachers in on this discussion, not just politicians.
Yep.
It's the teachers that have to come in and say, yes, this is what I need. They're best to know what it is that's needed in the classroom. I think it's appalling that every teacher I've talked to has to spend money out of their own pocket just for basic supplies in the classroom.
And they want to take that reimbursement away from the teachers.
Absolutely,
now.
and they want to take that away from them. It's appalling. And I think it really is just an indication of a disconnect between what really goes on the ground versus up here in the ivory towers type of thing. And so education is really the foundation of Kansas's future as a progressive state.
As a person who's worked in school district, I like to say that's encouraging to hear you say those things. USD 259 just got a new superintendent, Dr. Alicia Thompson. I think she's great for the district. I've talked to her personally about some of the things that she wants to implement. My personal opinion is money is an issue, but the bigger issue is that we're not preparing children for the reality of what life is outside of school. And school is a very manufactured learning environment where I want you to learn this and want you to learn that, which aren't necessarily the skills that are going to take you above and beyond. If you want to go get a 9-to-5, you want to work for someone else, this is my personal opinion, then our schools are great for that. But do we want to produce students who are just workers? And maybe we need some of that, I guess, because I don't want to do labor jobs. Or do we want to create the best people? Part of the education problem in Wichita and Kansas is that our best minds are siphoned out to other areas. How do you stop that?
Right, a very good question. I think you're absolutely correct. I looked at some of the statistics, and approximately 30% of Kansans, if we look at the approximately 3 million people in Kansas, about 30% of them have a degree, which means 70% of them do not, and probably that's not going to change significantly. We need skilled workers. So vocational education is the crux, really, I think, of that foundation of society that we need. And gosh, there's a lot of skilled labor jobs, welders, plumbers, and so on, that they make as much or more than young people with a college degree. Mm-hmm. And so I think part of the education formula has to look at where we need the jobs, the training, and looking at what are kids really interested in. And like you said, we've got to educate them as to what's real in society when they get out. You're going to have bills to pay. You're going to have schedules that you're going to have to follow. You're going to have expectations that you will have to meet, and there are consequences to not meeting those. And the problem is, if they don't have a basic educational foundation, none of that even makes any sense to them at all. It just doesn't compute. And so part of the retraining or refunding, if you will, you're absolutely right. It's not always about just dumping more money into the system. It's also about bringing teachers in to the discussion. Mm-hmm. What do you need in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish in that area?
Look, let me ask you another question. You say whether you agree or not. Culturally speaking, do you think that it's easier for you to learn from someone from your own culture than it is from someone else?
That's a good question. I think probably so.
So could you see why many of the minority children
Yes.
are failing because there's a cultural difference in the way they're taught and the way that someone else from a different culture will learn? Because it's been my experience as a young black male working in a school that has predominantly minorities, certain cultural experiences are, you're telling this child you're wrong for this. At home, this is acceptable. In school, it's not acceptable. So that's where the disconnect happens at, because this student doesn't see this teacher as being culturally aware of what they're going through, or to explain things into them in a way that they can understand. There was a student in particular, African-American guy, he was having trouble understanding this word problem with math because his parents don't speak formal English that's written in the book. When I explained it to him in the vernacular that he understood, he got the concept not only of this problem, but of the whole way that you do this math work. And I think that that's a part of the problem, that a lot of the students don't see themselves reflected in it. And me personally, I didn't see the connection between, if I get educated, there's going to be a better life for me.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right on that. And I mean, I do see that in my practice, that your culture absolutely affects how you look at the same thing. Just like, well, my wife and I, and I'm sure most of you see that as well, your partner, she looks at things differently than we do, even though if we think it's the same thing, we don't see the same thing the same way. And we can say something, and she hears it differently than we say it.
Absolutely.
So it's exactly the same way. If I am an American and I go to Germany and teach, and I've taught in foreign countries, I have to first learn a little bit about their culture and their terminology. The first time I went to Australia, I sat in the back of a car driving to a venue, and there were two Australian farmers in the front talking. I didn't understand half of what they were saying because the terms they were using were English, but they were Australian English. And so I can relate to what you're saying because I know, like you said, it's not just culture. You have a different diet between cultures. You have as well a different dynamic in the home between cultures,
Absolutely.
between mother and father, between children and parents, between elderly and children. And so as well, that whole perspective has to come across. And so, yeah, we've got to have minority teachers as well in these various areas. Again, that's what I'm saying. We got to have teachers come into the system and contribute to what do you need in order to be successful with these children.
Now,
Absolutely.
Gary, listening to all this,
Yes.
give us your perspective on what you're hearing. And
Oh, so far, I was going to bring up the health field, but you want me to comment on what we've heard
well,
so far?
just has
Mr.
Anderson won you
Gotcha.
over yet?
Well, yeah, I would say you're dynamic in all the areas we've talked about so far, and particularly rather than cautioning farmers not to use so much water, to figure out a way to retain it. And I'm fully aware of
That's what we have to do.
Yeah, we have the Land Institute here and so on with West Jackson.
Yes.
So that makes a lot of sense, and farmers need a little convincing. So I think you're strong there, but if I may, I'd like to transition to health.
Sure, been there.
Since that's been your stock and
It's
trade.
life's work.
Well, yeah. First of all, and you're probably fully aware, I'm not sure how many folks listening are aware that the first thing Governor Brownback did was privatize Medicaid, which got rid of about $1 billion that became privatized, and so 3 insurance companies were making all the money.
Right.
Instead of providing services,
Right.
and it goes to education and everything else.
Right.
And so I'm sure you have thought about, is there a way you can see a path fairly quickly to reinstate a Medicaid, which may or may not be made available from the national government?
Yes.
But if it's possible to reconnect with that, is that something you studied and looked at pretty carefully?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, we have to.
Yeah.
We have to in order to start solving some of the bigger problems in our society. And the prison system, for example, if we don't solve the healthcare issue, we will never solve the prison issue.
Why do you make that correlation?
Because what I find in my practice, and we'll get to the healthcare to answer
That's
that.
good. That's a good
What I
question.
see in my practice, about a third of my patients are Medicaid and Medicare. I have a couple homeless people, and many of my patients are at or below poverty level. Even if they're not on Medicaid, many of them are at or below, out of Leavenworth and Lansing area. And what I see is that the lower their education level, and it's not college, I'm just talking about being able to get through high school, the less they understand about being able to read a label, about what it is that they need to consume. When you say you need to have more vegetables or this and that, it just doesn't comprehend. I find that their health correlates absolutely with their education level 90% of the time. And when we get into issues of diabetes, of heart disease, example, I have a gentleman who cannot read and write. He came in finally to the practice, blood sugars 400 to 500. We had to put him on insulin, but the problem is he can't read. So we had an insulin pen for him, he couldn't read it. We wrote things down for him on how to do it, he can't read. So the nurse had to actually teach him with the devices, like, this number is where we want you to have this set, and this is how you're going to give it to yourself. So his blood sugars are all over the place because he can't read and write. And how do you teach somebody?
But how does that correlate to the prison population?
I'm sorry. Okay. Well, what I see is that many of the young people, if they don't have adequate training, they don't see any way to find a job, a legitimate job. So crime is the only way that they see to gain any funds. That's one way. Number two, what we see is a number of people that are arrested really just need mental health care. They have depression, they have anxiety, they have PTSD, whatever it might be. They end up being arrested and put in jail when really we need to send them to the psychologist or the psychiatrist to have appropriate counseling and address their life problems. Next, what I see, and I have a very good friend of mine who actually is a physician in the Missouri prison system, a lot of these people, they start in the prison system, and that's the only place they get 3 meals a day. That's the only place they get health care. That's the only place they feel a family. So many of them have recidivism because they get out, they have no health care, they have no educational benefits, so they don't know what to do, and they have no family around them. So let's get arrested again so we can get back into that system. And so education correlates with health care and mental health care, which correlates with what I see in the prison system. And what I see is we're never going to address that until we get to these foundation things. Because many of my patients are actually in halfway houses. We take care of a number of federal prisoners that once they get out of federal prison, they go through a halfway house in the Leavenworth area. I end up being their physician. So I hear their stories, I see what's going on with them, I also see what kind of health they have, what kind of health care they had when they were in the prison system as well versus what they get on the street. So how do we solve this problem? What most people don't understand, and politicians certainly don't want to understand, and we hear this thing of, oh, we're not going to go to the single-payer system because that's a swear word. Guess what? We've always had a single-payer system. It's called the taxpayer. And so we need to get that out of the whole vernacular. The taxpayer has been paying this all along. What they don't want to see is that most industries, people get upset if we mix government with private industry. It's like, no, 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 no. Government needs to take care of itself and keep government out of private industry and keep private industry out of government until it comes to health care. So we have an adulterated system of a mixture between the public money, public system, Medicaid, Medicare, and the private industry. Same thing we've done now in the prison system as well. And what happens is we know, just like the prison system, as soon as private business comes into the public system, now there is an incentive to increase that. Oh, we got to build more prisons because we've got more business.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
we're going to cut back on the number of
Sad.
workers and just put them on overtime so that we can maximize our profits. It's not about rehabbing the prisoner. It's not about taking care of the patient. It's about how do we maximize our profit. What they don't want to understand is that Canada, Germany, Australia, all of these countries that have so-called socialized medicine, no, 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 no. They have two distinct systems of healthcare. They have a public system and they have a private system, and they don't mix the two together. We have an adulterated mixture of that system. So what we need to do to solve the Medicaid issue is to get private business out of this. Number one. Number two, our country spends twice as much on healthcare per capita as the closest other country. We spend 17% of our per capita on healthcare. The closest one to that is Switzerland, they spend 11%. We don't have twice the healthcare system that Switzerland has for its people. So where's the money going? That's the point. The money is going a number of places, and I've actually done those numbers, and I've looked at it, I've investigated it. Number one, we need to be able to purchase and bid medications. Give you an example, Victoza, it's a common diabetic drug that we use. We checked the cash prices in the Leavenworth, Lansing area. $713 to $1,100 is the cash price per month for that product. It's $229 in Australia. Why are we spending 3 to 4 to 5 times for that drug in this country? Why are we subsidizing that country then? Because we're told, oh no, our drug companies need that money because they're doing research here. Really? Understand, you all have done business. If you hire an employee, if you do research, that's tax deductible. That money doesn't get taxed anyway.
Yeah.
What they have to answer to is why we have $2.5 trillion offshore. So that money that they're making with our pricing that we have to pay for isn't staying here, it's going offshore. So what we need to do, and that's fine in the private system, but not in the public system. We need to be able to purchase medications from Canada, Australia, Germany. I'm not saying China or Mexico. I'm saying countries that we equate as being just as good a quality as here. I run the numbers on some of those. Right away, that knocks 10% off of our cost per person on Medicaid. Number two, radiology. If you are a private physician, and the clinic that I was in Lansing, 5 years ago was owned by private physicians. At that time, they had an MRI in the basement. The maximum compensation that they could get for that MRI was $500. The day that the hospital took it over, it went to over $2,000. The same MRI,
Wow.
same system. There is an organization out of Florida, in fact, Subaru hired them, it's called We Health, that went to that area. Subaru, by the way, is in Lafayette, Indiana. They have 800 workers, and they hired We Health to say, hey, we want to do in-house health care for all of our workers. We Health went around the community, and they bid MRIs, CTs, X-rays, all the radiology for Subaru, 800 workers. They were able to get MRIs for $400. Wow. $400.
Mr. Anderson, I hate
Yes.
to cut you off, but the only problem I see with what you're saying is that you're making too much sense. And people don't want sense. We want to profit off of people no matter what their pain is. What I'm hearing you say and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you actually want to do right by people.
Absolutely.
What if I enjoy a system where I profit off of people's pain? Is that okay? I mean, because if I'm in the medical industry, I'm really not there to heal people, because healthy people don't make me money. How do I profit off of healthy people?
That's the private system. That's the
There
private
you have
system. There's nothing wrong with that. And all of those countries have both. They have a private system and a public system. And the bottom line is that what I see is they talk about, oh, well, we need to go to the free market. Really? Somebody who makes $1,000 a month and has a $450 rent to pay, and they got to pay food and so on, they don't have $1,000
Those people
left
should
over.
just pull themselves up by the bootstraps, Mr. Anderson.
Of course, we hear that.
If they wouldn't be
you got to
poor,
have
then
boots
they,
in order to do that, though.
that's true, but it's their fault that they're poor. If they wouldn't
Right.
be poor, then they
And
could
it
afford it.
is.
We all know that.
And it's interesting, and I know
good.
I hear those kinds of things out there, and the bottom line is that we can have both. We can have both. Right now, we hear about the Obamacare, Affordable Care Act problem. The insurance companies are pulling out because they can't make any money. That's fine. Go to the full private system and get out of the public system.
Yeah.
Let's do the public system for less money. Granted, the public system might be a Chevrolet. You want to go to the private system, you got the money to do that, you may get a Cadillac, but you're still going to have health care with Chevrolet. You're still going to get to and from work. You're still going to have good transportation.
In all seriousness, we were on the same show, and my thought was, with the level of resources this country has, the fact that we're not talking about some form of universal health care is really a sham to begin with. I suggested the same thing. My theory was, you have the private, you have the public, you send certain people to school to be doctors, pay off their student loans, come work for the public side for a while. If you want to go into the private side, then you do that afterwards or whatever. Someone on this show told me I was ludicrous, that it would be a butcher shop, that people would, and I just don't think that the average person is really that incompassionate towards people. I mean, I'm liking what I'm hearing from you, and I don't really like too much of what I hear from anybody.
The thing about it is that, unfortunately, we do have a few individuals that truly don't care about other people. That is true.
Right.
I didn't get into medicine to be that way. And so, and the reason I'm running for governor is because I do care about people, and I see them every single day, and the issues that I have to go through every day to get approval of their medicines, approval of their wheelchairs, approval of their crutches, approval of their physical therapy by people who are not physicians. So what I see is, if we put physicians back in charge of the doctor-patient relationship, we would get this kind of stuff done. But what we continue to have done over the past decades or so, we elect non-physicians, and we expect them to know enough to be able to set up a healthcare system that's going to work. Wrong, doesn't do that. Shame on us, physicians, for allowing that to happen. But the bottom line is that if I want my car fixed, I go to a mechanic. I expect that to be taken care of at the right shop. Why wouldn't we expect the same thing with healthcare then? That's why I have a plan to be able to actually solve it. Am I so naive to believe that, everybody's just going to accept that and go through? No, but we have to have direction. And the governor is supposed to be the representative of the people, all the people of the state. And so I'm looking at being able to teach people, look, this model does work. It works in other countries around the world very well.
So, and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I just have good questions for you, I guess.
You're ludicrous.
Thank you. The way that you're explaining things to me is rather refreshing, actually.
Thank you.
How much, to me, there's several factors to health that's going on here, right?
Yep.
It's not only the exorbitant cost of health care
Right.
once you get sick, but still that's the output. Being sick is the output. The input
Correct.
is why you get sick.
Correct.
So especially you being in agriculture, living on the northeast side of Wichita, they termed it a food desert.
Right.
What are we doing to get healthy food, and it's ludicrous to have to say healthy food
It is, isn't
into these areas. Like, what are, because we wouldn't have as much health problems if we weren't eating such poisonous foods to begin with.
Absolutely, and that's a very good question. And actually, that question really is asked pretty much in every state. It's asked in just about every country that I've been in as well, depending on where you are. Because what we find, urban areas, university areas are more eclectic relative to food availability, and the further away you get from those, the more difficult it is to have healthful food. You're absolutely correct. It has to start with agriculture, in my opinion, and it does and is in various places, with improved quality of the food at the farm level. So we don't have the pesticide residues, so we have higher nutrient density. That's really the key thing. That's one thing that people don't talk about, is if I have an apple sitting here in my hand, how much vitamin C is in there? How much vitamin A? How much magnesium is in there? And that's all about what went on at the farm. And so if I only have X amount of money to be able to buy one apple, I want to maximize the amount of nutrition that's in that one apple. So then, if we get the agricultural system operating properly, we then have better quality food. Then we have to go back to the education side. We have to go back to the healthcare side, because people have to have money to be able to purchase those things. And why we see more food availability in the cities is because there's more income there. There's more financial things to be there. Now, if I may, one thing. There was a school in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Appleton, Wisconsin. Several years ago, it was a parochial school. And this is the last resort for children that got in trouble. If they didn't make it there, they were in prison. All right? Oh. Juvenile prison. This school, it took like 3 to 5 years, something like that, for a group of citizens to convince the board, we need to put in better quality food in the cafeteria. They started putting in salads and real foods into the cafeteria, and within a year, their recidivism level went down, their truancy level went down to nothing, their failure rates went to nothing. Food is so important. So we start in the schools, in my opinion. And that's public money, but let's start in the schools and get those kids better quality food. It's been proven already. So I'm not just talking pie in the sky.
It's definitely scientific that, lunch pretty sucks.
Absolutely.
Now, you have made some incredible points tonight.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Ross, you and I were discussing actually before on my way headed to Salina from Hutchinson about a question that you had for our guest this evening about when he becomes governor. Do you want to jump into that, my friend?
We know what it is.
Yeah, I'll jump right in, and I'll just make this my last question, because we have so many good questioners there tonight. But yes, Mr. Anderson, I'm hoping that Kansas will hopefully come like a majority of the rest of the nation and see that the whole thing with drugs, especially marijuana, maybe needs to come to an end. Being from Lansing and Leavenworth area, you probably know over half those prisoners are there for being drug dealers, right, both on the state level and the federal level.
Right.
Do you advocate a better way to do things that way? I mean, we've eliminated so much of the black market here in Colorado. True, we do have a heroin problem, but there's no place in the country that does not have a heroin or opiate problem.
Right.
But that being said, we have there are no more pot cartels in Colorado, really. In all seriousness, but so I'm just wanting to see what your attitude on that is, and I want you to address hemp. Hemp, non-psychoactive hemp would be great for Kansas, in my estimation. I'm wondering if you might see that as a good cash crop for the dry western Kansas, where maybe they shouldn't suck all the water out of the ground.
It's interesting that you asked me that question. On my way driving here this afternoon, I actually had a person call me from Texas because they have set up with some officials a research project on growing hemp for fiber in Texas. The cotton farmers are interested. The rice farmers are interested because water is a valuable commodity and it's getting less available down there. So without question, agriculture is our #1 economy in the state. We need more crops. And we need something that allows them to diversify. And hemp fiber is one of the best fibers on the planet. And we can grow it in our arid western counties. And it's one of those things that also is a renewable resource for us as opposed to plastics, which plastics unfortunately are contributing significantly to our cancers, to problems. They're endocrine disruptors, so we know they cause hormone problems. So we need renewables that also help the farm economy. So I'm absolutely on board with the hemp side of the equation as far as we need that as another crop for farmers. The marijuana issue obviously garners a tremendous amount of attitude, I will say. I look at it from a medical perspective, and there are some very good studies out there that there are some excellent uses for medical marijuana. Cancer patients, as well as pain patients. And the thing that I remember, and I have done a little bit of history on Prohibition. All Prohibition got us was more crime, and extremely violent crime. And even today, if we travel around the United States and we find counties that are so-called dry counties, guess what happens to the counties next to them? They sell all kinds of alcohol.
Yep.
Alcohol is illegal for youngsters under 18. Do we have a teenage alcohol problem in this country? Absolutely we do. So we have 50% of the fatalities on the road today are alcohol related. So it isn't working to make them illegal. It is a treatment problem. And that's what other countries are looking at more and more. We had the war on drugs declared 50 or 60 years ago, and all it's done is increase the police force, increase the crime rate, and increase those people addicted to it. I have to deal with the opioid crisis every single day in my practice. I know it firsthand. And so I realize we're in a Republican state, but Republicans also have problems with drugs, and they need their businesses to be diversified with hemp and so on.
That have drug problems. I've never heard of it. It's fake news.
It's fake news.
The important thing is that I think because of the culture that we have in the state, we would have to move slow, but I think, first of all, we need a medical marijuana law so that we can at least begin to start addressing, one, the prison population issue, two, the opioid issue. And you can say, well, people are going to be addicted, all you're doing is trading one for another. Yeah, we've got a lot of alcoholics too. What are we going to trade that for? And so that's legal, and that is a problem. And not only that, it's a serious problem in our minorities. Fetal alcohol syndrome is a major problem on our Indian reservations around the country. Hey, it's legal, and we're not doing anything about it. So we need to be able to control it, because one thing that we do know is that as long as these things are illegal, they're going to be tainted with things that we don't really want people to be getting in there. For example, they're cutting marijuana on the street with formaldehyde. So now I, as a physician, am going to have to deal with that person's liver failure or other issues with them where if at least we had a script pad and we could guarantee the quality, we also increase revenue to the state, and we decrease the outflow to the prison system and just putting more and more people in jail. And unfortunately, it's more and more minorities because they don't have the education to be able to get a better job. So we end up, so it really is a prejudicial, in my opinion, a prejudicial decision not to allow medical marijuana. And that's, for people to say, oh no, we can't do that, then what you're saying is I have 7 years of medical education, and you who have no medical education, you're smarter than I am when it comes to how to deal with biochemistry of a person.
They watch YouTube. I YouTube everything.
Oh yeah, that's right, they watch YouTube.
So if
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you an expert in like 15 minutes.
Right,
You don't like
that's right.
that video, you go to the
That's
next
right.
one. So if
That's
you,
right.
so if you're saying that you have a dry county and it's causing issues in the next county, then wouldn't that be kind of the same for Kansas being next to Colorado?
Absolutely
And
it is.
then,
Absolutely, we know that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
you know, there were a lot of reports in Colorado about minorities being left out of the medical marijuana trade and not getting licensed in and different things. So I appreciate your honesty.
Yeah.
Now,
That's good.
sitting here listening to all this, Todd, as we were talking earlier about fake news, you're not fake news.
Right.
As me and Ross have said on this show on many occasions, you are the most trusted news person in Salina, Kansas.
Well, I don't know about that, but I thank you for saying that. I've got a question. I want to
Yes.
talk about open records in Kansas, or maybe the lack thereof. Kansas City Star, I don't know if you've seen it, has done a tremendous
Yes.
piece, a series of stories all this week about how Kansas is one of the most secretive states in the
That's what me
nation
and Ross were talking
when
about.
it comes to doing government business. I've saw several legislators now have spoken out, yeah, we want to change that, we get it, we understand, but it needs to start at the top. You would be the man at the top if elected. What can we do to make Kansas a more transparent state than it is now? Because as a reporter, as a news person, I've seen first of all, it's not even easy to make an open records request. Second of all,
yeah.
most people don't even know how to do it. And once you do learn how to do it, it's not an easy thing to do.
Very good question. And I think it's the foundation of a constitutional republic to be able to have access to public records. And to have access in a way that doesn't require a PhD to get them, or an attorney to get them, or a huge bank account
Right.
to get them. And so, again, I think the governor is supposed to help represent the entire state, set the tone, and get the word out, so to speak. And so the governor can help to educate the population as to, hey, we're having a problem being able to get access to given records because of this. Send letters, emails, faxes to your representatives because we need this changed. And if we don't do that, I think we continue to have a problem with funding and sufficient funding, because people don't like to do things that they don't know about.
Yeah, right.
I know most people, and my patients as well, and I'm the same way, if there's certain things that I'm going to have to do, and I know that I'm going to have to do it, if I understand them, okay, I'm going to have to do them, like doing your taxes every year, you know? You just know you have to do that because there's a consequence to that. And so if the people of the state are able to access fully the records of how money is spent for education, how was it spent on the roads, where is it going and why, those kinds of things, and who's doing what, they then can carry on an intelligent conversation about what is going to be needed in order to solve that problem. They may not like it, but at least they know what actually is happening and why. So long term, short term, we have to have access. I mean, it's absurd. It's just like a number of other things. It's absurd that we don't have full access to records.
Well, I mean,
That's good.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but what if you don't want people to have access? Because If we give poor people access to this information, they may not be poor anymore. And then what am I going to do? I don't want to compete with poor people. I don't.
You're absolutely correct. And some of the most delightful, loving, wonderful people I know in my practice are in the lower socioeconomic level. They're just wonderful folks. And you're absolutely right. And so that's why I'm going there. I'm not a career politician. I admit it. I don't have a lot of fancy statements to make in politics and whatever.
You have facts.
But I have facts.
Dang you.
You don't.
And the thing about it is, but the thing about it is,
emotions.
Exactly.
and maybe I can answer it this way. I've taken 2 oaths that I take very seriously. I've taken one, my medical oath to first do no harm. And I do everything I can to help my patients. It's my responsibility. I make life and death decisions every single day. Number 2, I've taken the oath to defend my country with my life if I have to. And I've been deployed 3 times and activated 4 times. I take that very seriously. So for me, becoming a governor is just an extension of that. I don't have to do that. I mean, seriously, financially, my wife and I, we don't have to do this. I don't have to put up with this stuff. I could be home with her tonight.
You're putting up with this.
No, but I mean, I wouldn't have to put up with the campaign thing and being away from home and doing all that kind of stuff. And the thing about it is the reality is, financially also, it really doesn't matter what the state does. My retirement's not going to be affected.
Yeah.
My wife and I have worked hard for many, many years. We've done our homework and put our money away. So we're going to have a reasonable retirement.
Yeah.
So that doesn't help my patients.
The bigger picture.
The bigger picture. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help my safety, because from a personal perspective, the only way that I'm really going to address safety in Kansas City, I've got to get a better education system going. I've got to address why people are on the street shooting and knifing and stealing and all that kind of stuff. I've got to address that real issue. If I, as a successful middle-class person, want to be safe, I really have to look at why there's a possibility that I wouldn't be safe and address that issue. That's the only way we're really going to solve any of these problems, is that we have to recognize we're all in this together. There's only one of us here, really. We're humans. We're all in this together, and we have to address that.
I mean, it's a profound thought, just to think that you would actually be brazen enough to actually focus on problems, like actually solution-based. I don't know, maybe it's crazy to think about. I mean, I like to Band-Aid things because...
Israel, I do this every day. I have to deal with problems every single day. Patients come to me because of that.
I'm going to ask you a serious question.
Yes.
Basic, flat-out question, right? Other than historically, blacks have voted Democrat, if I'm a black person in Kansas, why should I vote for you?
Very good.
Good question.
I think that question could be asked by the Native Americans, the Hispanics, any of them.
Okay, I'm representing them now too.
That's what I mean. No, I'm serious. I'm saying
grandfather them all in.
any of those. Number one, because I'm a primary care physician, I care about you as an individual.
Okay.
And number 2, as a military officer, physician, I care about you as an individual. I take care of you as an individual. And that's how my success personally is gauged. How successful are you as an individual? And so once I get to the governor's mansion, it's the same thing. Because the only reason I'm there is to address those issues. I don't care about being a career politician. I'm not interested in that. I want the next generation, my patients. In some cases, I already take care of 3 generations.
Yep.
Wow.
And so, to me, I take that personally. I still give patients hugs. I've cried with them because
in
of
this
issues.
era of harassment, you're giving people hugs.
Absolutely.
Good Lord.
Absolutely. I had to give a lady a hug today because she was crying with me. Her husband has Alzheimer's, and she's having to make the decision that he's not going to get any better.
Yeah.
And she's full of tears, and she needed a hug. That's part of the healing process. So I care about people individually, and I know that the only way truly my life is going to be improved at this stage of my life is if other people are improved.
I'm a pretty good judge of character. I mean, I've been wrong once before, but that was it. So my intuition tells me that you're being a truthful person. But this is what, from my minority point of view, I've studied politics, I've been on a lot of campaigns.
Right.
This is what we see. You have a guy like Trump, a white male, who brings all these minorities into the White House and he makes all these promises. Now, while I am concerned about the individual, at the same token, as a black male who lives in Kansas and loves being from Kansas just as much as anybody else, what I want to hear is what is going to happen that's going to make us a part of that too, directly. I mean, I'm all for Native American rights, I'm all for minority rights, but, you know, in my opinion, too many times blacks support those groups, but those groups don't come back to support us.
That is correct. Education and healthcare. That's my answer to that. Education and healthcare.
What about the Black Farmers Association? And what about grants and money for minority-owned businesses and revitalization and not gentrification?
Education and healthcare. Because you can't be a successful black farmer unless you've got some basic education. You got to be able to balance a checkbook. You got to be able to understand how to read a soil report.
I agree with that, but I'll offer this to you, right?
Okay.
You need to have a degree to work for a business, right? But the business owner doesn't have to have a degree to own the business.
That is correct.
So at the end of the day, it has to boil down substantially. I'm just being flat out how it is.
You're
okay?
absolutely right.
I can't be concerned about other sides of town when I come to my side of town and it's impoverished.
That's right.
When I'm looking around and the streets are the same as they've been since I've been a kid, these buildings are dilapidated, there's people with great ideals, but they don't have access to the things that they need to make our community flourish. As governor, if you give me a good answer, I will dedicate myself to getting you elected. I will tell everybody who's any skin tone darker than you to vote for you.
There you go.
Now, as we wrap up here, Gary, I want to start with you. Give us your thoughts on this evening. And
it appears that you're in good company among the competitors in the primary. Do you, in your own mind, you don't have to tell us, have the person who's most likely to be the most highly competitive with you in the Democrat primary?
I would say probably Josh.
so ironically, we'll be on here next month.
Yeah. I like Josh. He really is a genuine guy, and he's energetic, and he's been around the block a few times on various different things, and so he, I think, is probably the
most likely.
Probably the most likely competitor.
Well, and it's I'm just glad you're part of what I consider a very good entourage of candidates.
Yes,
and I think that's nothing but good.
Right.
And we need some competition. And I can't remember the last time the Democrats, let alone the Republicans, have had a primary.
Primary,
honest to God, what could be better? What could be better?
Now, Todd,
I'm glad you're on
give
board.
us your take and.
Well, I just want to, again, thank you for your service, Doctor. And thank you. It's a very courageous thing to go forward and put your name on a ballot. It's not an easy thing, especially in this era of social media. I've always said one of the worst things that's happened to our society is the ability to leave anonymous comments on websites, whatever. That does not bring out the best in people. Right, it does not bring out the best in people, I'll say. So thank you for putting your name on the ballot. Thank you for running, and thank you for bringing ideas to the table. And thank you for instead of looking out for a party, looking out for me as a Kansan.
Now, Ross, give us your take on Mr. Anderson this evening.
I need to say that you cannot be governor of Kansas unless you've gone through the Jiggy and Ross meat grinder.
Okay.
But I do have to say, of Democrats so far, you are some of the most of the best, well-educated, best-spoken, and have some of the most original ideas. I support you, sir. So
Thank you.
I hope the best for you, and it's going to be interesting to see where this goes.
Thank you.
Israel, before we go, give us your take on.
I was thoroughly impressed. I hope that in your pursuit of your goal, that things line up and that there's people who will be there to support you in achieving what you want to achieve. Because if you're able to achieve even a portion of the goals and the things that you have set, will be a much better state, and I think will be a much better example of the nation of what can really be achieved. I think that there's a era not only in Kansas but in the universe where change is happening, where people will be rewarded for looking out for the individual. Right. You seem to be in line with that.
Right.
Well, before we go, if people want to get a hold of you online or contribute to the campaign or just be involved, how do they do that exactly?
Thank you very much. Yes, you go to Anderson2018.com, and my email will be arden@anderson2018.com. And
Got you in
also
here already.
we are on Facebook and most all the different social medias, and so they're easily accessible that way.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And thanks to our panel. And next month we will have Josh Sabati here in studio. And thanks for watching us here in Saline County on Channel 21. Go to salinatv.org. Find us on Facebook, all the various places. And thanks for watching live from Salina. Have a happy Thanksgiving.